This is music, and this is a handful of occult first impressions. Welcome to another first impressions video. In these videos, I share with you my first impressions of the many blind buys I've picked up lately. Starting out with this one here, a bit of a cheat, Noctum, the Seance. It's a bit of a cheat because I've heard this one a bunch of times, used to have a digital copy of it. But this one was sitting in my inbox next to some genuine first impressions, so I figured I will just include it. Why not? So these guys are going for a very retro metal sound, and we're not talking new wave of traditional heavy metal. That's that 80s style. These guys are going for an early 70s, almost like late 60s sound. So that mildly distorted guitar tone, which is more like almost like fuzzy, if you know what I mean. And they do a pretty good job actually of emulating that sound and that style. The production is much cleaner, obviously, than back in the 70s and late 60s. But musically, yeah, I think some people would consider this stoner rock. I wouldn't go that far, especially because it's quite dark in the atmosphere. As you can see, they're going for an occult vibe here. Uh, there's a kind of a doom metal undercurrent to everything on here. Not in the sense that it's full of like slow parts and stuff. You have a couple of those, but it's more in that very dark atmosphere. But this is very good stuff. I actually really enjoy this one. If you like your 70s, late 60s hard rock, these guys are worth checking out. I mean, obviously they're much younger than that, right? But they do a pretty good job of capturing that sound. So if you are of the mindset that I wish those new wave of traditional heavy metal bands, they would look back to the 70s just every now and then, bang, there you go. Now some thrash metal. This is Purged, form of release. And this is very 90s sounding thrash metal because I think this is from the mid 90s. So it's this kind of post Black Album thrash. So they've slowed down a little bit, but you still have lots of really fast parts for sure. You have a guitar tone that reminds me a little bit of Among the Living, actually. And then you have a vocal style that is somewhere in between Phil Anselmo and 90s James Hetfield, because, that's what you would want to sound like back then, I guess. And you do have a lot of groove metal in here, lots of really groovy parts, but it's more in that vein of the earlier style of groove metal mixed in with thrash, and you have a more thrashy guitar tone. So this is great. I actually really enjoy this one. If you are a thrash head and you come across a cheap copy of this one and you don't mind some groove metal influences, it's worth checking out for sure. Up next, you got another cheat actually. Paradox by Royal Hunt, a very similar story to the Noctum one. I've heard this a bunch of times and I used to have a digital copy. This is epic progressive power metal, lots of synths. They do have a foot in the cheese camp, but it's not too much. Very melodic, actually very catchy and accessible in many places, which I guess, newcomers to progressive metal might appreciate. So the songs are sophisticated when they have to be, and they're accessible when they have to be. Great vocals too, obviously amazing musicianship. I always like listening to Royal Hunt, although they are a little bit cheesy. Up next, you have Sarkator or Sarkator. I've heard both names. Thrash metal. This is Alcahest, and yeah, it starts out with a song that made me think that I had accidentally uh, put on a Collision album because it was like grindcore and thrash metal mixed. But It's just because they mix in a lot of different styles and approaches in their thrash metal style. It is modern thrash metal, I would say, at the core, but with like, yeah, other elements and places. It's very melodic, bordering on being power thrash, and in places it's very almost like alternative in a way, without sounding like 90s alternative metal, but kind of drawing a little bit on that anyhow. The vocals are very carcass-like, so that's cool too. So I think this album by Sarkator is probably best described as interesting thrash metal, and interesting in the positive sense. So yeah, really good stuff. And up last, we have this one here, Ultimatum Lex Metallis. So this is Scott Waters' band from the vinyl community. It's him right here looking all mean. So this is a covers album. It's full of cover songs of uh, heavy metal and thrash metal classics. Some are more well known than others, I think. But yeah, yeah. So you have Ton of Breaks. That's a very cool cover version. Sin After Sin, but it's the Twisted Sister song, I think. There's Creeping Death by Metallica. That's always a good song. Denim and Leather, the Saxon song. Motorcycle, song from what a lot of people consider to be a more questionable Megadeth album, but they do a pretty good job of that one too. Uh, got Iron Maiden, Wrathchild, and so on and so forth. So yeah, they do some very good and fun cover versions of these metal classics with Scott's, I would say, trademark barking vocals in the vein of Zetro, I think, but he's going for a harsher style of singing here. So it's like a Zetro growl in a way, without it being like death metal growling. So so yeah, that just adds a little bit, I think. So yeah, good fun. Listen here. I actually really enjoyed listening to this. This is like a, I think, a love letter by the Ultimatum guys to, just metal in general. And they're good cover versions too, and it's fun. So yeah, that's great. So there you go. A handful of first impressions. I enjoyed all of them, but as usual, check them out on your own. Thanks for watching.